Hello and welcome to another Intersections podcast. My name is Alex Cunningham and I have the privilege of introducing the wonderful Quan Collins as she interviews the wonderful Jeff Evernham. Without further ado, let's get right into it as they tell us about ChatGPT and all the wonderful things that you can do with it.
Well, thank you, Alex. I appreciate the introduction. And Jeff, it's really great to see you again.
Yeah, a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, welcome to Samaya Studio. So as you know, our podcast, Intersections, is all about bringing together technologists and talking about technology and how do we help with the adoption of it, or even just thinking differently about the technology in the context of the work that we're trying to employ using the technology. So today's topic is ChatGPT, and it feels very trendy, right, to be talking about ChatGPT since everybody's talking about ChatGPT. And I know
I can't even keep up with the news, all the new articles that come out every day. It's overwhelming.
It really is. And I think what's startling to me, because I'm always pro new things, right? I want us to be open to new technologies and new ideas. But this one is particularly alarming for some reason for me from a data scientist perspective. And I know you and I have talked about this before, which is what triggered, inviting you to this podcast. And this idea of, we already have such a challenge on our hands with data accuracy and validity, and us reporting things that are not necessarily evidence of things and concluding things based on that. So this ChatGPT is really frightening me in particular, and not to the point where I'm saying we shouldn't even think about it or anything like that or ban it, but I really think that we should highlight it and understand it. And so what I'm hoping to accomplish with you today is helping our listeners with understanding the technology, what it is and what it isn't, and how does it get implemented, like what's behind it, right? How does it work? How is it doing the things that it's doing?
And you're right, there's a lot of confusion about all of those things.
Yes, there is. So I want to expose like the clarity and make it clearer. And then what should we be concerned about when we think about the use cases that folks are applying it to? And then, what's the future, right? How do we move it in a positive direction for our community? So with that, why don't we start from the top? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background too, so that, the audience knows why we should be listening to Jeff about this, and then, launch into the ChatGPT and what it is.
Sure. So I'm 30 plus years into my career at this point. I started as an aerospace engineer with a bachelor's and a master's degree there. So very focused on the technical side. And then my journey took me through Boeing, through software companies, through some consulting companies. And over the course of that trajectory, I really started to take a strong understanding of what are kind of the real business challenges that are out there and how do people interact with technology. And so I think my strength is being able to take complex technology things and figure out what do they do for people and what are their limitations, and kind of be the translator between the people who don't have the time or the interest to go into the details and the people who do know how to put all this stuff together. I spent the last almost 7 years now in a software company focused on search. So very much like Google, but instead of for the internet, it's for companies' internal resources. So instead of having to hop from system to system and being disappointed with finding things, it's a single entry point that searches across a company's entire assets. And so we've recently incorporated the same kind of technology and ChatGPT into our product. And so we've been working on incorporating this AI now for almost 4 years. And so it's a super exciting time to be in this space, a little bit scary too, but we've got this in our product and we're looking to see how is this going to shape what we are doing as well. So it's kind of both the professional interest and the personal interest that brings me here today.
Awesome. Well, that's really exciting. And I know from, having experience with the platform that you've been working on, I'm really curious to see how we can, leverage that for our customers too. So talk to me about this idea of chat versus search in the context of ChatGPT, because I think there's sort of this misnomer that ChatGPT is a search capability.
That is a great question, and you're right. You just hit the nail on the head in terms of one of the points of confusion. So we'll talk about ChatGPT specifically, and we can talk about large language models in general later. But ChatGPT is essentially a large language model that was trained on content from basically the internet, publicly available information, through about the end of 2021. And you say, well, gee, that's pretty old. Well, it is, because it costs a boatload of money to train one of these large language models. I mean, you're talking $10 million plus just to do the training. It's a very lengthy process, very expensive. And so they trained a model and it does amazing things. But what you have to realize when you interact with ChatGPT is it only knows what it's already been trained on. And so that contains the information through the end of 2021, and it really can't incorporate new info, as opposed to a search engine, which at the time that you give it a prompt, so you prompt ChatGPT and it responds to you, you prompt a search engine in the same way, we usually call it a query. But when you send a query to the search engine, it's going out to find that information in real time. And so the timing is different. And then, of course, there's a big difference between a generative model and a retrieval model. ChatGPT is a generative model, and that means it creates something new every time you interact with it. It uses its knowledge. I'm using air quotes. You can't see that on the podcast, but it's using its knowledge to generate a response. Whereas a search engine, in the way we know it so far today, doesn't generate anything new. It's just retrieving something that already exists. And so those are the two fundamental differences between what you see in ChatGPT and search. Generative retrieval and from the model versus from a corpus of knowledge.
So that's a really significant point, and I think it's a little bit lost in the current dialogue around ChatGPT. So I want to sort of bring out the points that you just made. So ChatGPT, and to me, so I have some experience with this idea of directed dialogue, right? I think that's what we called it whenever we were sort of helping early chatbots, right? When we were thinking about applying it to end user service desk kind of solutions. And so to your point, that model is trained on a limited data set, right? There is a limitation on what it's trained on. And it's exorbitant amount of resources, right? To add in a continuous way to that model and make it trained at some level of fidelity. So one, you're limited on the source. So that needs to be clear. And then two, to your point about generative and creating new sources of data now based on the way it's been trained, I think it's significant to understand that this new content is not validated, right? So it's just based on the data it had access to, but it didn't necessarily make sense of the way that it synthesized the information that it now created.
Absolutely right. And this generative idea is what everybody is excited about.
Right.
But at the same time, they've overstated its capabilities in the realm of search. I mean, there were a bunch of articles saying, oh, this is the Google killer. Well, no, it's not, because it can't do search. You're actually comparing apples to oranges. Now, it can supplement search. It can provide some new capabilities to search, but it will not replace it. So let's talk for just a moment about generative and why everybody's excited about ChatGPT. Well, we're excited about it because it writes really well, and it can write really well on a whole range of subjects. I mean, you're right, the knowledge base is limited to what it has been trained on, but it can talk about just about any subject that's out there because they trained it on so much content. What it can't talk about is newer things. But if you think about it, there's a lot of history that's worth discussing, and ChatGPT knows it pretty well. So it can generate new things. What does it do really well? It does really well at the best use of ChatGPT is to generate something fictional. If you want to write an essay about history, you want to write a poem, you want to write an email about something, those are not necessarily, hey, there's a specific way to do it, there's a specific fact. It will generate those things exceptionally well. It does a fantastic job of changing style. This is one of the things that has amazed me the most. You can give it an essay that you've written on a topic, and you can say, rewrite this so that it sounds like it's written by a fifth grader. Or rewrite it so that you can take a complex topic and say, rewrite it so it can be understood by a fifth grader, or rewrite it so that it sounds like it comes from a PhD professor, or rewrite it so that it sounds like Elon Musk wrote it, which that's a lot of fun.
I loved what you shared with me the other day when we were talking about this. So tell our viewers what it was. It was something relating to Elon Musk, a letter.
Oh, yeah. Someone had, I don't have the prompt in front of me, but someone had prompted and said, pretend you're Elon Musk and write me an email to fire my Twitter employee.
That's so crazy.
And it was hilarious because it came back and said, yeah, you're fired, like really fired. Like, we're going to the moon and you're not, or we're going to Mars and you're not coming, fired. I mean, it was hilarious. And you could just picture Elon Musk saying those things.
Actually saying that, yeah.
Yeah. So from a stylistic, to be able to take something and transform it to another style is phenomenal. And if you guys are, if you're familiar with what's happened in the image world, there are other models like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and so forth. And that's what they're doing. They're taking pictures and they're transforming them or recreating them in a style of any artist of your choice.
I have had so much fun with DALL-E. So I actually learned about this from my students, and they had done some artwork for one of the presentations that they gave to me. And I was like, how did you do that? Where did you get that graphic? And they started telling me about this DALL-E thing. I'm like, oh my goodness, now it's like, it's like the black hole when you get on there, because it's so much fun to like test it out and see, can we do something that's like James Bond and space travel all meshed into one?
Yep. Yeah. DALL-E and those models are to images what ChatGPT is to text. Yeah. And so this is the first time where we've really had this kind of capability. And so ChatGPT is great for creating an email or a poem. I had it write I gave it a few characteristics about my wife and said, write a poem. And it was pretty good. The only problem is now I can't write her any more poems. She's told me she doesn't trust it came from me anymore. So that's what it's great at. It's also really good at translation. Because if you think about that, that's transforming from one style to another. Yep. You don't really think about it that way, but that's what it is. And the other thing that's been surprisingly good at is coding. It can write a good program. It can even debug programs.
Really?
Yes, you can send it code and say, is there a bug in this code? This is what I want. Yeah, you can say, this is what I want it to do. Here's my code. Will it work? And it will come back and do a pretty good job of telling you if you've got a bug or what you need to change. It's really amazing.
That seems pretty amazing. Yeah.
Well, it is until you think about something. If you think about the world of language and you think about the world of coding, what's the difference? Coding is a language, but it's a much more constrained language. You have to have a very specific syntax. You're giving very specific structure. And if you deviate from that, it's going to break. Right. And so that coding is actually a much easier problem to solve.
There's rules, right? There's rules, yeah.
Than free-form language. Yeah. So those are the things that ChatGPT is really good at. And that is opening up a whole new realm of capabilities and, stuff for the average person. Yes, writing essays for your high school or college homework is a problem now because you can have ChatGPT do it and it's probably going to do better than the student would have done on their own. It sounds.
We already had that problem though, right? I mean,
yeah, but this takes it to a whole nother level.
That's true. That's very true. I'm not sure.
That's what it's great at, but it has shortcomings. And the biggest thing is the so-called hallucinations. And so, like you said, it's trained on the information that it has, but it doesn't really understand. It is a probabilistic model. Behind it, believe it or not, is all math. It's just doing what is probabilistically correct. And so for a lot of things, it works really well, but you can't trust it on specific facts because it's going on a probabilistic basis. And so there are all kinds of examples out there, particularly when you get specific. If you go to a particular person and say, tell me about this person and their accomplishments. There was an example where a professor asked it about himself, and it said that he had won the Nobel Prize. And he had not won the Nobel Prize. He had won a number of other awards, but because ChatGPT is just looking at what it already knows and probabilistically determining it, said, you know what, a person like this
should have won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, exactly. And to it, that's good enough. So the danger here, one of the dangers, is that we get sucked into the convenience of reading a quick little answer. And because it sounds so confident, it's so well written, and because it just comes across as a fact, that we accept that without fact checking it. And guess how we have to fact check it? We have to use a search engine. Because when you get this answer from ChatGPT, there is no indication whatsoever of where the information came from.
Right.
It can't tell you because it's a black box. It's this large language model. It's a deep neural network, and there's no transparency at all. It just says, here's the answer. How did you get the answer? I have no idea.
So we can't even tell like how many sources were synthesized to make the answer, right? Okay.
No, it's just one giant model, and everything is contained in that model. And it really, with the current technology, they are complete black boxes. There's no transparency at all. Now, people are working on trying to make them less like that, but where we are today, you have no idea.
So I think I tagged you on LinkedIn about a student at MIT that was trying to figure this out. Like, how do we identify what has been created by a generative AI? So that I think is super important, right? For us to be able to just tag those things so that we can at least, mark those sources. Because I think one thing you mentioned to me last time we talked also was that all of this new content that ChatGPT is creating is going into the corpus now, right?
Well, it can be. ChatGPT is not learning anything new. Well, actually, I can't say that because we don't know what OpenAI is doing with ChatGPT. They do appear to be taking some current events and supplementing the model in some way. We don't know the technology. We do know that they can't completely retrain it because, again, that's $10 million plus dollars. So they're doing something, because originally, if you asked it about who was the CEO of Twitter, it would tell you, I can't even remember who it was now, before Elon Musk. And then you say, no, it's Elon Musk, and it would argue with you. They've changed that now. So somehow they're supplementing it with something. And I don't know the mechanisms behind that. But what is happening for sure, if there could be an explosion in this content, people are writing this content and they're posting it to the internet. So people who are training new large language models now have a challenge of, do we train it on human generated content or machine generated content, or both? And how do we tell the difference?
Right. And how do we know whether or not there's accuracy either, right? With the
Exactly.
With the AI.
Yeah. Well, that problem always exists because there's plenty of false information on the internet.
Right.
And these companies have done a lot of work to try to filter that out from the training content, but they don't get all of it. It's just not possible.
It's not possible, right? And so for me, I teach evidence-based research synthesis at the University of Maryland. And, that's the thing that we train the doctoral students to figure out. So they go off, they do their, the collection of their data based on their research question, and it comes back with, hundreds of thousands of records associated with the search that they conduct. And they need to now scale it down, right, to something that's manageable for a student, right, to be able to reasonably go through and synthesize the information and then come up with an answer to their question. And there's this whole, quality appraisal and the systematic review rubric and methodology to go through all of that. And so what's challenging about that? And so we train this as evidence-based management methodology, saying that as managers of core human organizations, right, we need to be evidence-based and care about the quality of the data that we're using in order to make decisions within our organizations. And this is, I mean, it's a huge problem already, to your point, right? This ChatGPT aside, because, we'll read whatever, right? We'll read it, we'll assume, oh, it's data and there's numbers and words and we should trust it, right? We trust it because it came from McKinsey or it came from Gartner or it came from whatever. And we
Right.
don't question it because there's the tag, it's like, it's already been blessed, right? It's been
The source.
it's peer reviewed, and I'm using air quotes now too. And we don't ask the question of, one, is what we're reading relevant, first of all, to the question that we are asking? Two, while yes, we trust Gartner generally and McKinsey, and there's a lot of skill sets in those organizations, but is it, again, experience that is relevant to the stakeholder community that we are applying this to? And then, three, how did they do it? To your black box point, how did those brilliant people, minds at Gartner and McKinsey, come up with their analysis? Did they share the methodology with us? And did they share the raw data with us? Like, if I could repeat the thing that they did, then I would trust it more because I could generate the same outcome. But we don't ever get to see that in the reports, right? We never see the method, we never see the raw data, we never see the analysis. So that's the problem. And within organizations, we rarely question, I mean, hardly ever, right? Do we question those things? And so our program is trained to help with promoting this methodology in management. So now I think about this complexity with ChatGPT, because we already have a challenge, right, with questioning what is the source of this data and why do we believe that it is relevant? And now we can't even see the source of the data with ChatGPT, and that from that kind of perspective, it's problematic. And also, like, if we think about the fake news problem, right? We went through this with Brexit and the US elections the last go around. So now, I mean, this is like that fake news problem on steroids.
Sure. Well, I mean, you've hit upon a lot of different points there. A couple of things come to mind. So I'll take the fake news because we were closing on that one. You have the problem of fake news already. There are bad actors out there who, for whatever reason, want to make up lies. And now they have a tool,
right,
that allows them to create massive amounts of content that sound phenomenal.
Really good.
I said ChatGPT is great at constructing fiction, right? So all you have to do now is give it a prompt and say, write an explanation of why, and then insert whatever conspiracy theory you want to create. And it will create a compelling story. And so they can now easily publish that all over the place. So yeah, it's a tool that can be misused like any other technology.
Well, and then I think about the whole deep fake. Remember, we were seeing, like, the like Obama, like, saying things that he never said. And so now you combine the deep fake technology with a speech written by ChatGPT. Holy cow. I mean, that's just insane.
Okay, so let me spend just a moment and let's go to the dark side.
Yeah,
and then we'll come back to have some hope for the future.
Yes, let's have some hope to wrap it up.
You can do the doomsday when you lay out this technology. Like you said, ChatGPT can generate reams of fake information that sound incredibly credible and authoritative. We've got the DALL-E, which will generate images, any kind that you want. And you talk about deep fakes. Well, guess what's next from DALL-E? DALL-E is just doing images from scratch. The next step is videos from scratch. Mm-hmm. And so you can create videos to do anything. Right now, there are video generators out there. They generate short clips of pretty poor quality, but the technology is going to evolve and evolve very quickly. And Microsoft announced that they have a technology that can replicate voices with a voice sample of 3 seconds.
Oh my God.
So you can post your, vacation video to Facebook and talk on it for 3 seconds. And now Microsoft claims that they can, well, they don't claim. I've seen that you can go on the website and you can see their examples, and they can take that voice and make it say anything they want it to say. That used to be something that required hours of recording. In fact, there were companies out there that would let you, record your own digital voice for
Right.
Now you don't need hours. You just need a few seconds. So the direction where all this is headed, I mean, if you think deepfakes have been a problem, they're going to be a much bigger problem going forward. I'm not the doomsday type. So
yeah, I try not
a lot
to
of
be.
bad scenarios. I don't think you're going to be able to create detection methods for all of these things. I think we're just in for a tough transition as a society, where we're going to move from the point of kind of trusting things by default to the point of mistrusting things.
Everything, right.
And I don't know what that's going to look like. We'll figure it out, but
we will. All right, so let's end on a high note and talk to me about where we go from here. I guess, it is exciting technology. And, you talked about sort of integrating some of this in what you're doing for your, the work platform that you're developing. So how should we be viewing this going forward?
We are at a world of new opportunities, and we are at the very beginning. So we've talked about how ChatGPT technology, not ChatGPT itself, is getting incorporated into Microsoft's Bing. Google is doing the same thing. They've released, it's not available yet, but they're going to be releasing something called Bard, which incorporates it as well. And what you have to realize is they're not just replacing search with these models. We talked about why that doesn't make sense. But what they are doing is we're opening up a lot more possibilities by leveraging this technology for what it's good at. So let's take Microsoft, for instance. They're incorporating it into Bing. Sure, it's going to be fun. But where the real value is going to be when they incorporate it into Microsoft Word. So now when you need to write something, you get help. You get help well beyond what you could have gotten before. They're going to incorporate it into Outlook or the online mail. And so drafting emails is going to, so there's going to be a productivity improvement. There's going to be a lot of help in those kinds of areas for text generation. It will also help search. Now, like I said, it won't replace search, but what people are doing to solve some of the, what Bing is doing to solve some of the problems with these models for search is instead of going to the model and asking the model a question, if you want to find out information on a topic, what you do is first you run a search. And you say, so if we wanted to say, who is the CEO of Twitter and what has he done lately to improve the company? Well, ChatGPT knows nothing about that because it's old stuff. But what we can do now is we can run a search, and we can take the top 10 results that we got from search, and we can send those 10 results to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, summarize those results.
I love that. Okay.
And that's what's being incorporated into the search engines.
Because now we can control that. We know what sources were used to synthesize the information.
Exactly. So what happens is it's not giving you information based on its model and what it already knows. It's giving you information based on what you feed it. So you know the material that's going into it. You have that traceability. It's much less likely to hallucinate now because what you're sending it is a much more limited set of information rather than the vast amount of information that it's been trained on. And you have some traceability. Now, it's not perfect traceability, but when it produces its result, if there's language in the result in the summary that matches something that came from one of those web pages, you can link to it. And that's exactly what Bing's doing. If you've seen their results, they write a summary and then they'll have footnotes basically. And each footnote is a link to the page that brought that information in. So now you can do fact checking.
I love it.
It's not perfect, but again, this is like day one of
a it's
long journey. And so you can read all the stuff about how Bing is horrible and this new, all the people who are testing it, they're just creaming it right now for all the bad things it does, but they're overlooking all the benefits that it actually does bring. So that's the new benefit of search. You're going to go to Google, you're going to go to Bing, and you're going to be able to do a search. You're going to be able to get a summary when you want a summary. You're going to be able to get links when you want links. You're going to be able to translate. You're going to be able to rewrite stuff. You're going to be able to create things. So the whole idea of what we used to do to go to search, it's now going to be search plus. It's going to be search plus a whole bunch of other things. But a lot of the things when we're looking for information, search is actually more important than ever for two reasons. If your summary comes from your search results better be good.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy for a human to look through the top 10 and look at item 1. Yeah, that's good information. Item 2, yeah, I want to use that. Item 3, that's not relevant. Item 4, that looks fake. And so you'll skip item 3 and item 4 in your top 10 of your research. But if you're feeding that into one of these generative models, it's not going to know to skip that.
Mm-hmm.
So the quality of search results is now more important than ever because it's going to feed these other models. And as I mentioned before, it actually is the only way to fact check and determine the source and reliability. So, as a search company, we're excited because this is just going to bring, when people figure this out and realize the spotlight is going to come back to search because it's going to help to enable all of these other things work even better.
Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and our listeners today at Samaya Studio. And it's always a pleasure. I learn so much every time we get together.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and it's a super exciting time. Like I said, it was funny. I talked to someone at one of the analyst companies, and we're talking about how this is just like a gold rush. There's so much happening so fast. And he said, yeah, at this point, I'm just happy when I publish a blog post and I don't have to go back and edit it 12 hours later.
That's awesome.
So it is moving so fast. It's exciting. There's going to be all kinds of new things that we haven't even thought of yet. So yeah, I love talking about this stuff too. And at the rate things are going, maybe we'll do another podcast in the near future. So
we probably have to. Yeah.
I'd certainly be willing and enjoyed the conversation as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care. We'll talk soon.
That was insanely informative. Thank you so much, Jeff, for telling us so much about ChatGPT and other AI programs like it. I thoroughly look forward to seeing you come back on the podcast just as much as Quan does. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed. We want to give a shout out to the Samaya Studios for helping us out with this program. Check them out on LinkedIn. And also, the Spark Studios. Check them out as well. If you want to find us, we're UAHI2C, and you can see us anywhere on the internet. Just search it, and we'll be there ready for you. Have a great day. Onward and upward.